Welcome, everyone, to the Strive for Good Life podcast. I'm here with Garret Hunt. He is the co-founder and CEO of liveineverett.com, which is, according to their website, a control hub for local delight in Everett, Washington. So excited to have him on the show today, and we're going to just jump into Garret. How are you doing?
Hey, good. How are you, Nino? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks. Really appreciate you being here because, we've been friends for a long time, and you've got an amazing story. And I think you've got a lot of value that you can add to the audience. And so I'm excited to just jump into some stuff. So let's start with giving us a background, specifically with your entrepreneurial journey and how you've kind of, maybe those early inklings that you had of being out on your own and how that all started and how you got to where you are now.
Sure, yeah. It's kind of funny because I didn't necessarily set out to become an entrepreneur, but as you know, I've been skateboarding for a long time, and it's kind of funny how looking back, I think like growing up skateboarding, especially back in like the late 90s when there weren't hardly any skateboard parks around. And so we were primarily street skateboarding, and it was kind of this countercultural thing that was really, you do it with your friends, but it was very independent. And I got into making skateboard videos through that, got really into filming and filmmaking. And I think from an early age, that instilled a little bit of like a do-it-yourself ethos, because skateboarding is just such a kind of guerrilla type activity where you just go out there in the streets and you get stuff done and you get after it. And I really liked that feeling and that sense of kind of freedom of just going out, exploring, figuring stuff out. And so that was really one of my first big passions was filming skateboarding. That was kind of one of my first careers. I pursued that through my early 20s. And when it came to figuring out kind of my next steps in life, when I was ready to move on from that, I think doing entrepreneurial things just kind of made sense to me. Like I ended up selling real estate for a number of years, which a lot of people don't really fully understand how real estate works. Like it doesn't really matter what real estate brokerage you're with. 99% of the time, you're an independent agent. You are your own business. And the reason that almost any real estate office will happily take you onto their, quote unquote team is because it's generally a commission only business. So that office has nothing to lose, but everything to gain by bringing you on as an agent with the hopes that you'll be successful in being able to sell real estate, which, 80% of real estate agents don't renew their real estate license within the first 2 years. It's a very hard industry. It's kind of one of those things that's easy come, easy go. And so that was kind of a big deal for me to kind of prove to myself, coming from the skateboard world, being a little bit of like a, street oriented skate rat to going onto, putting on the sport coat and being like, oh, can I, handle assisting people making one of the largest financial transactions of their lives. And so it's funny kind of looking back, from skateboarding to real estate to now I run my community blog, live in Everett, and I've done these different things really mostly just as an independent contractor or small business or entrepreneur. And that's just kind of the course that has made sense to me. I've never been very excited to get out of bed to go work for somebody else to help someone else build their dream. And it just kind of naturally, it's kind of the natural path that I've ended up taking.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think it's interesting that kind of at each step in your journey, you've had to be comfortable with generating your own income. I mean, with filming, right? I mean, that's essentially what that is. I mean, you have to go out and get the footage, record the skating, and then you're selling those clips essentially, right? And so,
Yeah.
I mean,
I was just, for years trying to pursue that. I mean, I was just a straight up starving artist. I was
yeah,
I'm very anti-debt. I don't recommend people going into debt, but at the time, my paychecks would be few and far between. And believe it or not, as cool as skateboarding might seem to be, most skateboard companies don't want to pay you money, when you send them footage for a video. Sometimes, believe it or not, even some of the larger companies, it might take me 12 months to get my small little paycheck from the handful of footage that I sold them for that video. And so I was constantly having to like juggle between getting, there might be 1 month where I might get a few checks from different videos I submitted footage to. And then there might be a few months where I don't have any money coming in. So I'm living off the credit card, or, this is down in the Southern California area near LA. And so I would also work as like an extra on like movie sets and TV shows sometimes, just to make a little bit of side hustle money. And eventually I ended up getting on full time with a skateboard company that actually gave me a steady paycheck for a while. But yeah, it was definitely very much so just kind of like a starving artist mentality of living, check to check when I was lucky.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just interesting to me because it seems like, yeah, for the path you've taken, you've had to be very comfortable with that kind of income model, right? Where you're taking risks, and sometimes things pan out, sometimes things don't. And so how have you been able to hang in there in those types of situations when most people, like you say, can't handle that, especially in the real estate world where there's such a high churn rate? What do you think separates you from someone else that fails in real estate?
Well, one thing I'll give my parents credit for is what they taught me about money growing up was that essentially I could have whatever I wanted in life as long as I could figure out a way to save up the money and buy it myself. And I really took that to heart, like as a young kid making, a couple dollars here and there for like allowance. Like from an early age, like I became a saver because I became just very focused on my dreams. Like I grew up in kind of a rural area. And so someone who was passionate about skateboarding, like I wanted to get out of the rural area. I wanted to go to the city and the concrete and the streets. And so I became pretty focused from an early age on kind of like getting out, like as soon as I was done with high school, like I was out of my parents' house and like I was gone. Like I was just hyper focused on my dreams. And so, I didn't think of it this way when I was younger, but hindsight being 2020, I think it's all about alignment. Your grit that you're willing to put into something is a reflection of how badly you want it, right? And so for a lot of people, the financial part holds them back. But if you want something bad enough, you'll figure it out. You'll plan ahead far enough. You'll work that other job temporarily that you don't want to be doing because you know that is going to help fund that long-term goal that you have. 'Cause don't get me wrong. I mean, I worked plenty of other jobs when I was younger. I worked at a local community college doing landscaping. Ironically, I did security there where part of my job was to kick out skateboarders, which thankfully I didn't have to do too much of that. But, you do whatever you have to do to earn the money to fund the dream. And if you're not willing to do that, then maybe that's not the right dream for you. You have to be aligned with your proper motivation if you want something bad enough.
Yeah, I really love that. Speaking of that, I guess, like what in your opinion has made it easy to align that motivation and I find your real, purpose in what you're trying to do? Because I think so many people struggle with that piece of it. Like they don't really know what they want to do. They have an idea that maybe their job isn't working out in the way that they want, or maybe they want something else. But they don't really know how to start. They don't really, maybe have anything, any ideas to go off of in terms of maybe building a business or starting a side hustle. Like, what do you recommend for people like that?
Yeah. And I think not knowing is a great place to start if you can be honest with yourself. And, I heard this idea years ago that stuck with me, that real growth comes from the inside. It grows from the bottom up and the inside out. And you think about how plants and vegetables grow from a seed. And I think very much so, we as humans are the same way when it comes to genuine, authentic growth. And it's not necessarily meant to be easy. I got into growing microgreens for a while, these little vegetables. And part of the process actually after you plant the seeds is you weigh them down and you put a lot of weight on those little seeds and you black them out. And it's putting that strain and that stress on them that forces strong roots, And so I've definitely been there plenty of times in my life where I have that sense of not being clear on my direction. And I know that can feel frustrating for a lot of people, but I also think it's a beautiful part of the process. And that's one thing that I always have to remind myself of, is that this whole process is a journey, and the journey is the point. And so even though we go through those seasons of darkness and of strain and stress and uncertainty, and we all always want that clarity, it's that other underside of it that makes the upside so beautiful. And that's what's funny too, like looking back to the different phases of my life that I've gone through, like when I was younger, skateboarding was all I wanted to do in the world. I wanted to be a professional skateboard filmer. And if you told me when I was 20 years old that 10 years from now, I'm really not going to care hardly at all about skateboarding, and it'll just be this fun hobby I'll do here and there, I would have said, oh no, you're crazy. I was so fixated. I was like, this is the one thing I'm going to do with my life. But we go through different seasons and different changes, and we evolve and we grow. And that's all just a beautiful part of the journey. So I empathize with people who are lacking that clarity and they're not quite sure. But also I would encourage people to accept the fact that that is just a part of their process and of their journey. And at some point, they're probably going to look back and say, oh, actually, that season of unclarity helped me in the long run get clear about this or that. Because sometimes it's about learning what we don't want or what we don't like that helps us channel through the narrower direction that'll ultimately serve us for where we want to go.
Yeah, I really like that. I've found that to be true in my life, definitely. Plenty of times when, it felt like I was floundering, but then, months, maybe years later, I look back and realized that there were valuable lessons there in that time. You said something about, you used that scenario of looking back to maybe when you were 20 years old and how fixated you were on skateboarding. A lot of people talk about needing to obsess over a goal to really remain focused. I mean, have you found that to be true in your life? Just is in terms of, actually achieving the end goal that you sought after?
Yeah, I've noticed maybe more so than some, I am naturally wired that way, where I actually do pretty well being hyper focused on one thing. First it was skateboarding, and then it was real estate, and now it's my community blog. And I'm almost like good at being obsessively focused. Like if all I have to do is just channel everything into one thing, I actually thrive with that type of mindset, at least in the short term. I think long-term, big picture, it's good to stay balanced and to be open and well-rounded. And I think there's lots of benefits from allowing more. But, we're all wired different ways. We all have different strengths, personality types, all those sorts of things. But I do think when it comes to achieving a specific goal, knowing what is going to help you in that. And that's one thing I'm thankful for, that it just, for whatever reason, it seemed aligned with my personality style, that I am able to pretty easily, if I want something bad enough, if there's that alignment of motivation, I can really hyper focus on that one goal.
Yeah. It seems like it's really helped you out. I mean, you've been successful. You've successfully achieved all the things you've set out to do so far. A lot of people can't do that about themselves.
I've never read the book, but I know it's gotten a lot of good press and notoriety, which is Gary Keller, who founded Keller Williams Real Estate. He wrote the book, and I think there's a podcast too. It's called The One Thing. And it's the whole idea that multitasking basically is a myth, and kind of the power of, that singular focus that, I've always liked the saying that what you focus on expands. And yeah, I think there's really a lot of truth to that.
That's amazing. It's an incredible book. I've read it. I really enjoyed it. And I completely agree. And I know that I need to do a better job of being able to focus a lot of the times. And it's tough for people that don't have that natural inclination, I think. But I believe that it's a skill that can be developed and not something that, we can never achieve for ourselves. So I think that's awesome. I want to talk about Live in Everett and really jump into that, kind of what you're doing with it, maybe even dive into the revenue model and how it works on that level. And then, maybe we can dive into the marketing aspect a little bit, because that's always fun for me. So yeah, what can you tell us about what you're doing with Live in Everett?
Yeah, so liveineverett.com. I always have to like slow myself down when I say it a little bit, because a lot of people are like, what's it called? So yeah, Live in Everett. And so I mentioned I used to do real estate, and so my friend Tyler Chisholm, actually, he had been doing some work in local tourism with the city of Everett. And he basically pitched me on the idea because he kind of learned and realized there was this gap that, but he was working in local tourism, which was focused on creating cool content for people outside of the area to bring them in. No one was really focused on the locals and creating content for them. And so he kind of pitched me on this idea of him getting into real estate with me and us starting this community blog together to serve the local community. And so that's how it kind of came about back in 2015. Fast forward 8 years now, I don't sell real estate anymore. Tyler actually took a job working for the city of Everett. He's got a good job over there, so he's not involved in the website anymore. But basically, it's just a blog all about the good things happening in our community. So we share about local restaurants, fun things to do. We have an events calendar. We send out a weekly newsletter. And the way it gets funded, aside from we do a little bit of one-off advertising. We have some awesome patrons who donate a few bucks each month to help support the website. But the primary revenue model, we have memberships where local organizations can sign up, and essentially they get ongoing promotion and benefits on an ongoing basis. So we're partnering with that brand, because what I found with the one-off advertising, you put so much time into onboarding a new advertiser, figuring out their messaging, the right channels and stuff where you want to send people and promote. And it's just not sustainable long-term. If someone just buys one ad one time, and also for the advertiser, they're probably not going to get many results from a single ad, right?
Yeah.
So it makes more sense. We have more of a longer-term partnership. We find those cool community organizations that are aligned with our values. And, it's a very humble little website. It's nothing too crazy or fancy. Everett's not a huge town, about 100,000 people. But it's always had a bit of a challenge being, I would say, culturally in the shadow of Seattle. We're only about 30 minutes from Seattle.
Yeah.
And Everett is the county seat of Snohomish County, which is the next county north of Seattle, King County, where Seattle's at. And because Everett's the county seat, it's the biggest city within our county. So it also has the highest number of social services, the highest number of rental units, a little bit of a lower average income for the area. And so for a lot of people in the greater region, Everett has for a long time had a negative perception. People say, oh, that's where the homeless people live, or the drug issues are, or the gang activity, or these different things. But the reality is, in a city of 100,000 plus people, that's pretty good geographic size, there's all kinds of stuff going on. And there's a lot of good and great stuff, and awesome restaurants, cool events, cool cultural stuff, good art scene, good music scene, all these different things that was pretty obvious was underappreciated in many ways. So it's been fun to be able to spearhead this website that's just dedicated to promoting that positivity in the community.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so interesting to me that, the negative perception of Everett and how in a sense, you get to transform that by highlighting all the beauty of it. And I think that's great. We need more people shining light on positive things in the world. And so I really can appreciate that. Um, in terms of, well, I had a question about something, and now my brain's going blank. But when it comes to, okay, so I had one question specifically regarding, this is what it was, regarding your transition from selling real estate to live in Everett, because it does sustain you, right? It provides, for your lifestyle. And I remember the other day when we met up, you were talking about how, the transition is better off for your time with Miriam. And so can you touch on that a little bit, why you made the shift, other than maybe that reason, if there were any others, and what you've found that you really enjoy about being able to run this business as opposed to doing real estate?
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, don't get me wrong, like, financially from a business perspective, almost anyone would look at the path I've chosen to take and they would think that I'm crazy, especially with where real estate has gone the last few years, since I've transitioned out of it. So I made way better money selling real estate, best money I'd made in my life. But I also worked a ton. And the thing when you're selling real estate as well is that you're almost always on call. And I feel like to do a good job for my clients, I needed to be able to answer the phone at night or on weekends and be ready to get to work. And so when I had my first child, she just turned 5 a couple months ago. And so when I was getting ready to become a parent just over 5 years ago, and looking at my lifestyle and my schedule and how much I was working and everything, and real estate did help me get ahead a bit financially. And so looking forward, I was like, man, I really want to be able to be present with my child, especially while she's young, to really be able to be there for her, to enjoy her, to be present, to not always be stuck on the phone or stressed out. And so I've chosen a lifestyle that is really very simple. One of my biggest priorities is keeping my monthly expenses low. And that's really what has allowed me to be able to shift and transition away from real estate and just doing this community blog that, like I said, I mean, it's a pretty humble little website. It's nothing too crazy for our, little community, but I'm able to sustain that and make it work because I live a pretty simple lifestyle. And I love the flexibility that it gives me so that when I do have my daughter and I need to, pick her up or drop her off or do whatever needs to be done, I can, 99.9% of the time, always be there, always be available and prioritize her. And, I can just only imagine even more so as I get older and as I look back with, how quickly kids grow up, that I'm going to be grateful that I get to be present during this time and I get to, really prioritize this time with my daughter while she's young. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's incredible, and that you've been able to make that a focus. That says a lot about you. There are so many people I think that, would prioritize the higher paycheck, right, and not think so much about maybe the long-term consequences, or even have the ability to think about designing the life in the way that you have. And I think a lot of that comes from maybe this belief that the only way to really get ahead in life is to earn more money. So I think that's part of this toxic piece of our culture, I guess, where we're so hyper-focused on always increasing our income. Whereas, you've taken the other approach and you've just dropped your expenses a lot, and it's enabled a lot of the freedoms that, these other people looking for higher incomes are really, trying to build their lives after, if that makes sense. So I think it's cool that you've taken that other approach to it.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with, people taking a different approach, that they want to make money and chase the career and the income. And if they're in that stage of life, that's great. But one thing that's kind of funny about my journey is that I used to be hyper focused on what was practical and optimal. I was into reading business books and really trying to figure out best practices of what's most efficient and this and that. And the more time went on and the more I kind of positioned myself to where I didn't necessarily have to keep going that direction, I realized, I had this thought, like at some point, okay, because like my thing with capitalism is always, my question is to what end, right? Because like you look at a publicly traded company, say, whose sole goal is their quarterly profits, right? It's all about more profits the next quarter forever, ever, and ever, and ever. And it's like, okay, well, to what end, whether you run a business or just your own life and you're thinking about your direction and your mission, it's like the old habit from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People: begin with the end in mind, right? So what is your end goal? Where do you want to end up? Where's your destination? And so what I realized is I was trying to live this optimal life. What I came to think to myself was, thinking about the rise of artificial intelligence and robotics and kind of where technology is going is, okay, if I think 10 years down the line, if I'm all about trying to do what's most optimal and in a sense, almost living this robotic life, what's going to be the difference between a robot and me? And I started to think more about the value of not trying to do everything of what's most practical, but the beauty and oddity of doing what's impractical, right? And starting to live this reverse life of saying, okay, it might be more practical in the eyes of the world to go make more money, but I don't care because I don't need to, because I have enough. I've decided I have enough. That's my end goal, is to have enough. And so once I realize and acknowledge I already have enough, I can say, actually, my beautiful daughter, and being there for her and being able to be present for her childhood and supportive of her and my own state of being in a good place that I want to align with her, that I can allow myself to be the person I want to be, who is raising my daughter. I can prioritize that, which might not seem like the most practical thing. It might not add the most to my net worth at the end of my life, but it's what's most worth it to me, right? And that's what everyone has to figure out for their own alignment of what's genuine and authentic and true to their own selves. And then you start to open up more opportunities and more paths that are just more interesting, and I think leads people on more fulfilling journeys.
Right. It seems that, I mean, the traditional path is kind of just one line of thinking, right? When in reality, if we just think outside the box a little bit, I mean, it opens the doors, like you said, to a lot of different opportunities. I think that's really cool. I guess in terms of moving forward, then, what are you excited about? And, what are your plans in terms of maybe with Live in Everett or continuing to build up your life, to be more purpose driven or to have more freedom or whatever it is that you're looking for?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I do see kind of a new direction I want to go, which is starting a clamp farm and living more of like a homesteading lifestyle and learning more about sustainability. And, but, that's just like a timing thing of when I'll actually be able to get the land to kind of start working on that. Real estate prices are crazy right now. And so that is an idea I have. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. Like I said, as much as I can be good about being hyper focused on something, I've also kind of learned the value of just allowing things to kind of unfold as they may. Yeah. And so I don't really have like a strict timeline for that. Right now, I'm just enjoying my daughter while she's young and growing up and enjoying life. Really, I don't have like strong like set goals for Live in Everett right now. Like really in the last few years, Live in Everett's actually had to kind of take a step back and shrink a little bit and adapt. I've gone through some of those changes and evolutions. And right now I'm fairly content with where it's at. Like I hope it'll keep growing. But I think what we're doing is working reasonably well. I mean, it's been 8 years now, so we've kind of stumbled our way forward into where we're at now. And so really just keeping it going, keeping it being a consistent source of positivity in the community. And whether it ends up being me who continues running that long term, or, someone else takes the torch to carry it on. I mean, either way, I just hope it can continue to serve the community in a positive way.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. In terms of in terms of the challenges, you said stumbling forward with it, right? And so it made me think about, what kind of challenges have you faced, and how you overcome them? What are some tips, in regards to facing those types of challenges that you dealt with?
So one of the biggest challenges with living in Everett was when I did not play red light, green light with the finances, which is to say excuse me. So with red light, green light, the idea is, I can't remember where I heard this years ago. I don't know if it was a Dave Ramsey thing or somewhere else. But the idea being that if you don't have the money to do something, then it's a red light. You don't do it. And you wait until you can save up the money to do it. And then it's a green light and you can do it. And with Live in Everett, because we did have it tied in initially to the real estate business, my original business partner, Tyler, he and Laura Chisholm, his wife, they had a creative company, Milltown Creative, that was also a part of it for a while. So we had money coming from different places. And so for a number of years, we decided to put money into Live in Everett that we didn't have. We were taking money from our other companies, our other profits, to invest in Live in Everett with the hopes that it would attract more advertisers and it would grow more. And so we had more staff. We were doing a weekly podcast and weekly videos and just producing a higher rate of content. And we basically were burning money for a number of years on a hope and a prayer that eventually this will pay off. And eventually, what actually happened was we had to make some really hard decisions, and acknowledge that it wasn't paying off and working in the way that we hoped it would. So we ended up having to lay off some staff, cut back on some of the content. We stopped doing the weekly podcast. We stopped doing the weekly videos because this stuff is really labor intensive, and it took a lot of time from our team that we couldn't sustain anymore. So that was pretty tough. I mean, again, everyone has their own journey, and you have to kind of feel your way forward for what makes sense for you at the time. So I don't necessarily regret doing that, but, and in hindsight, I can look back and say, okay, maybe that wasn't a very good plan. Maybe I should have played a little more red light, green light, and waited for things to actually start working, for them to actually start generating revenue before we reinvested into trying to produce more. I think that can be a tricky balance. I mean, obviously a lot of companies leverage a lot of debt. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but in general, I really like staying out of debt. I don't like owing other people other things. I like to keep things simple. And so, yeah, I think if I were to redo it, I would probably do that differently.
Yeah. Okay. And so just in terms of what you would actually do, probably maybe have a more detailed plan, I can imagine, as far as when you would hit your break-even point on your revenue for whatever the activity or idea is, or how would you structuring it differently, I guess. If you have
yeah, I think just being more patient, and it really just comes down to operating within your means. It's like either the money's there or the money's not. If the money's not there, it's always a temptation to borrow money and to figure out how to pull yourself forward and to cut those corners, so to speak. But you also build a lot of character, and you learn a lot from the slow and steady, patient route of figuring it out, even though it may not be the most idyllic or attractive looking path. You got to do what you got to do. It's kind of the same thing I was talking about earlier. If you're funding your dream a certain direction you want to go, and maybe you have to work a job that you don't really want to work, but if it's going to help you save the money, it's going to ultimately fuel the dream long term,
Yeah.
It's that idea that sometimes in order to move forward, you got to take a couple steps backward to ultimately take more steps forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. I appreciate that. It kind of leads me to just talking about what you would do differently going back. I want to ask this question. So if you had to start all over from scratch, I mean, then you didn't have any of it. What would you do, and how would you go about getting your first customer for your business? What would you do?
Well, that it's funny. I'm just going to keep referencing books that I haven't read.
That's
but
all right. Yeah.
It's got a great title. This book by Gary Vaynerchuk, which what is it? Jab, 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 jab. Right hook.
Yeah.
And the idea being, when it comes to acquiring a customer and building a business, it really always comes down to adding value. And so that idea of give, then ask.
Yeah.
Right. I would say that's particularly true, like with what I do with the Live in Everett website, which is all about creating content for the community and adding value that way by delivering good quality content that people actually want to read and see. And so with a business like that, you have to give a lot in order to start building the traction and building the audience and the eyeballs before a company is going to be interested in taking a look at it. And so, like, using that as the example, my advice to someone starting out would be to position yourself that you can afford to give for a while. And I would say it was the same thing in real estate too. Real estate being a commission-only business generally, it took me 5 months to close my first sale. But that 5th month, when I finally closed my first deal, I closed 3 deals that first month.
Wow.
And I probably made more money that month than I had like the year before, but I had to position myself to where I could afford to give for month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4, before seeing any fruit from my labors. Same thing.
You're just planting seed, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I was going to bring up the seed analogy. It's like the same thing when you're growing food. Like, you got to keep giving the thing water again and again and again, And so really it's just patience. If you can position yourself to be focused on the goal of knowing where you're going, but to be able to do that without needing any return right away, but that you can be patient and you can keep giving toward that goal, then you're really going to position yourself to succeed in the long run.
Yeah, I love that. I actually recently heard Alex Hormozy basically say the same thing. And he also said that people grossly miss, how does he say it? I don't remember. I'm probably going to butcher it. So, in a nutshell, though, he basically said that people grossly underestimate the amount of volume it takes to actually gain any kind of traction. So kind of right along with what you said, as far as the amount of seeds that you have to plant or how much watering you have to do. I think a lot of people have this expectation that they'll do something and then they'll get a return or a result quickly. And a lot of times it's not the case. And so I've definitely found that in my life that you have to really be persistent and, like you said, not expect anything in return for a while. Obviously there's some cases, right? You can put money into ads and get some kind of ROI on that, pretty quickly, depending on how you do it. But in a lot of cases, building a business from scratch, you have to put in a lot of work first. And so I love that you bring that up.
Yeah, we almost have to go against the way that we've been training ourselves for so long now. If we're living this modern lifestyle, say being on social media every day, which is specifically geared towards instant gratification, right?
Right.
just dopamine hits left and right, like again and again and again. It's just the feed, I like the way I heard it explained for why they call it the feed. It's like the same way, like the animals, like feeding from the trough of just this never ending thing, right? Of just getting what we want all the time, always, which is basically the exact opposite mindset that I think you want to have if you want to successfully create something of your own.
Yeah, right. Which would be to work without any expectation, right?
Right. Yeah. That delayed gratification. It's like, what's that old test that you always hear like referenced in books and stuff?
The marshmallow test.
The kids with marshmallows, right? It's like, it's kind of a cliche, but there's so much truth to it. There's a reason why people keep using it.
Yeah.
That's the thing with old cliches. There's usually a reason why they stick around. There's some
exactly. So you've mentioned a few books, but I'm curious as to whether you think there are any tools maybe that have helped you achieve more, or with your business specifically, if there are other things that have helped you, whether it's a tool or a certain mindset or actions you've taken that you can specifically point to that have made a difference in your journey. Does that make sense?
Yeah, up until a few years ago, I was really into reading like business books, and I would have went that direction to answer this question. But the last few years, I've been on much more of like an internal journey, where things like meditation and yoga have become really huge in my life and so paramount and fundamental to how I see the world now, and how I show up and operate. And I still like reading books, but honestly, like I don't read that much anymore. I like, at first it was a lot of meditation, and then I ended up getting into yoga a couple of years ago, and now that's kind of become like my new meditation that's also infused with like exercise, and it really restores and centers me in a way that feels so healthy for my mind. It's almost because I go to a studio, so we'll do like these hour-long yoga classes, and it just kind of forces me to be present, and to become grounded in my own self. And I think there's so much truth in kind of the law of reflection, and as within, so without. And so even though we're kind of talking about these ideas around building businesses and an entrepreneurial path and these outward things, I would say from my perspective now, there's nothing more valuable that any of us can do than working on ourselves internally, because that's the real foundation that is going to truly empower us to be able to carry anything outside of ourselves forward and to bring something of value to the world, especially in a sustainable way. I mean, sure, we can make things happen. We can force it. As humans, we have a lot of capabilities, especially with the technologies we can leverage in this day and age. But for something to be sustainable, to be true to yourself, to be genuine, I think something that you're really going to feel good about, and feel proud of that you create, like I think there needs to be a certain alignment that's reflected from that thing that's from within your own self, that's probably unique to you. And to me, that's when it becomes so beautiful. Like I've always, when it comes to like art, like I've always liked the question of like, what really is art, and kind of taking the borders off of definitions, but letting our own unique value and our unique offering of what we give to the world, in a sense, almost be its own work of art or its own symphony in itself, whatever that thing may be. So that would be my biggest thing, would just be that internal journey of working on ourselves from the inside out.
Yeah, I love that. I agree with you 100%. I don't do yoga. I want to get into it, but I definitely feel a difference when I'm not. For me, I start my day off kind of spiritually centering myself. Right, I'll read scripture and pray, and I'll try to do a small workout of some kind, just get my body moving. And I definitely feel a difference on the days that I don't do that. I struggle a lot more to stay focused or to stay motivated, right? And so having something to ground yourself internally, I think it's huge. And I think it's a challenge for a lot of people because we live such busy lives. So it's you jump out of bed, you gotta rush to work or whatever it is, and so it's hard to find the time to do that. But I agree that it's 100% worth it, and it can really be a game changer.
Yeah. And it can definitely be anything. It could be different for everybody. Like you said, whether it's like prayer or reading, or it could be journaling, or again, what it makes me think of is really just probably something that is basically the opposite of instant gratification, of the instant dopamine hits that social media wants to just constantly feed us. Just that something, that intentional time to yourself, for yourself, to slow down a little bit, whether it's any form of exercise or reading or just some sort of discipline. I think discipline builds such strong character, and it's that simple thing we can challenge ourselves to do every day that's going to make us the person who can make the thing and do something great, or contribute something beautiful to the world.
Yeah, I love that. I agree. Well, we're kind of coming up on our time. So, do you have any closing thoughts? Anything else you want to share? And then, if you want to tell people where they can find you, connect with you, you can do that as well.
Yeah, you can find me through the website, www.liveineverett.com. And at the very bottom, there's like a contact button or advertise, or anything you send to the website should be able to make its way toward me. And I really appreciate you, Nino, and what you're doing. I'm excited for this journey you're embarking on. I'm excited to hear more of the podcasts, and I'm all about people being able to create more freedom in their lives and structure their life in an intentional way to live more beautifully. And so yeah, hopefully your listeners were able to get at least something small out of this. And I just wish everyone well on their journeys. I think life is such a beautiful process. And so I guess the last thing I would share that I've learned that has helped me is kind of just this idea of allowing. And, I talked a bit about just the fact that we're all in different places in our journeys. And so I just want to encourage people, for wherever they're at in their journey right now, even if you might be in a season where you're feeling in the dark, or you're feeling the strain or the stress pushing down on top of you, and you might be unclear about where you're going. I know it sounds crazy, but to just allow yourself to be there, to accept it to some degree, not to like a nihilistic, like negative degree of acceptance, but accept it to the fact, knowing that it is just a season, and that you are a strong person, and that you are going to be able to overcome, and that like the sun is going to rise again. Not to like sound, trite, but it is often those seasons of difficulty that break way to the more beautiful stage of where the world and the universe might be leading us to. So yeah, I always want to be encouraging to people, and just remind people how wonderful and powerful and beautiful they are. I think there's so much just right beneath the surface within each one of us. I think that's what we came here for. I think like we're all just meant to be on this awesome journey, and to experience it, even in the hard times, but to just allow it, accept it, enjoy it, and it'll go somewhere good.
Thanks so much for tuning into today's episode with Garret. I'm so grateful he was on our show. If you like this content, please share it with other people, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel so that you never miss an episode. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you guys in the next one.